The first time I heard the words, I was 13 years old, standing in a refugee camp carved into the side of Olympus Mons, trying to ignore the cold. One day, the children of Sol will rise from the dirt and the ash and burn the heavens of their betters, not out of hate, but because they must. The voice had come from a broadcast on loop. No one knew how it had made it past the planetary firewalls, but there it was. Old, raspy, alien. The speaker was a Xanthi oracle, one of the last surviving vision priests of a dying race that once ruled 2/3 of the Orion Arm. The news feeds dubbed it the Fire Sermon. We didn't understand it then. Now I do. I'm Captain Marin Holt of the Earthborne Heavy Assault Fleet, and I just watched us do the very thing they warned about. We burned their heaven. We burned it to the bedrock. The Luminari Ascendancy had ruled the Ixalis cluster for 3,000 years. Their empire was a lattice of perfect logic and spiritual order, enforced by fleets of living starships and a cast of telepathic, pure forms. They claimed to have transcended the cycle of violence. Their cities floated on clouds of plasma above gas giants. Their temples pulsed with harmonic light. Their priest kings spoke only in consensus. They were everything we weren't: elegant, ancient, serene. We showed them how fast serenity crumbles when faced with rage. It started small. A trade treaty broken on a technicality. An Earth freighter torn apart for spatial impurity. The pilot, a 22-year-old named Elias Park, burned alive in a flash of plasma that left nothing but twisted hull plating and a scattering of bone fragments. They said it was justice. We said it was war. But it wasn't war at first. Not really. It was a series of retaliations. A swarm of human hackers brought down half their quantum gate network in 72 hours. We sabotaged their synthetic synapse conduits. They retaliated by accelerating a moon into one of our outer colonies. 36 million dead. Enoch IV gone in a tidal bloom of magma and glass. That's when we changed. The United Earth Directorate passed the directive of final measure. No more politics. No more apologies. We stopped asking if we could fight the Luminari. We asked how hard we could hit them, and I volunteered. I was just a lieutenant then. My mother cried. My father shook my hand like a man already grieving. I left Mars with a squad of 30 and came back 3 years later in command of a Leviathan-class assault ship called Judgment's Wake. The name wasn't poetic, it was literal. Wherever we went, judgment followed. We hit them where it hurt. Temples, nodes of psionic communion, spires of transcendental thought. We shattered their meditative enclaves. We corrupted their sacred algorithms. We stormed their dream forges and poured sulfur into the cooling tanks. They begged us to stop, but we were already too far gone. You don't watch a moon fall and come back unchanged. By the time we reached the heart of their empire, the Celestial Trine, a construct that housed their collective mindscape, I was no longer the same woman who'd left Olympus Mons. None of us were. We were hungry, not for blood, not for conquest, for vindication. The Trine was a ring world of pure light, suspended in quantum flux across 7 layers of brain space. It was said to be unbreakable, eternal, the heaven of their philosophers and warriors alike, a place of peace. We turned it into a tomb. The Luminari had underestimated how adaptable we were. They'd spent millennia refining their ethics and architectures. We'd spent decades surviving extinction, crawling out of craters, teaching ourselves how to kill gods with scavenged code and particle accelerators held together with duct tape and spite. They tried to plead with us through psychic projections. They showed us visions of harmony, of balance, of a galaxy where we had a place. We showed them Elias Park's last transmission, a scream of static and melting flesh. And then we dropped the fire seed. It was a forbidden weapon, even by human standards. A collapsing starfold laced with directed anti-time fields and reactive dark matter. The moment it hit the Trine, their collective consciousness buckled. I watched it happen on the bridge. One moment there were millions of minds singing together in unity. The next, there was just silence. No explosion, no flare, just the light going out. A perfect heaven, extinguished in an instant. We stood there in the aftermath, orbiting the hollow ring, watching the last of its light bleed into the void. No cheers, no victory songs, just the quiet acknowledgement that we had done what the alien prophets said we would. We burned their heaven, because we had to. They called it a war crime. The Luminary Council, what was left of it, transmitted the accusation through fractured relays and broken psionic channels. "You have not wounded us," they said. "You have wounded the fabric of meaning itself." I stood on the command deck of Judgment's Wake, staring at the burned-out remains of the celestial trine, and I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I'd already said it. Once. With words. Now. With fire. We didn't come here to win medals or raise flags. No one on this crew believed in conquest. We were the children of Earth's last century, the century of drownings, famines, orbital strikes, and one long, blood-choked silence while the rest of the galaxy watched. When the Luminary came, offering us a seat at their immaculate table, they didn't offer salvation. They offered submission. "Let the violent ones kneel," said their emissary on Europa. "Let the Ashborn find peace." We remembered that, and now, in the smoke of their perfect cities, they were remembering us. After the destruction of the Trine, the war changed. It wasn't strategy anymore, it was scripture. We'd become legend, not heroes, not devils, something else, something inevitable. The surviving Luminari retreated to their holy enclaves, the so-called Axis of Grace. They abandoned logic, abandoned restraint. They unleashed the final tears of their long-forbidden thought forms, machines sculpted from living theology, bound to ancient moral equations and songs older than Earth's written history. We met their gods with thermobaric code swarms and sentient EMP storms. We turned their messengers into ash. They preached divinity. We preached entropy. And for every planet they tried to cleanse, we answered with orbital fires that didn't stop burning for days. Our AIs stopped asking for confirmation codes. They understood now. There was no diplomacy coming, no forgiveness, only acceleration. The deeper we pushed, the stranger it became. Luminary space warped under stress. Not physically, spiritually. Their worlds weren't just engineered, they were interpreted. Their cities reacted to belief. Their weapons sang in tones that made our bones ache. Our marines started going mad from proximity to their sanctums. Some killed themselves, others just walked into the gravity wells smiling. That was when we realized what we'd really done. We hadn't just burned their heaven, we'd desecrated it. The Luminari believed thought had weight, that every soul was a thread in a divine tapestry. When we destroyed the Trine, we hadn't killed a city. We'd torn a hole in their god. Their systems were unraveling, not because we were stronger, but because to them, we were a paradox that couldn't be unthought. "We believed in serenity," said one captured priest-warrior, before biting through his own tongue. "You are the silence between our prayers, you are the flame in the void of purpose." He thanked us before he died. The fleet didn't know how to process that. I didn't either. I started dreaming in languages I didn't know, waking up with blood on my tongue and fragments of Luminary hymns echoing in my skull. We all did. Something in that final blast had touched us, changed us. Not infected, infused. I remember one night, I was alone on the observation deck watching the stars through polarized glass, and for a second I saw Earth not as it is, but as they saw it. A storm-racked, grief-choked world too savage to be allowed into peace. A mistake. And then I laughed. Because we were never a mistake. We are the fire that survived the flood. We are the species that learned to speak before we learned not to scream. They thought they were gods, but we were the ones who refused to kneel. Command sent new orders. The war was over, they said. A political accord was forming around the ruins. The last of the Luminary pure forms had gone silent. The Axis of Grace was no more. We were recalled. Redeployment, disarmament, peace. But as I stared out over their hollowed worlds, I knew it was a lie. The peace they were brokering wasn't between humans and the Luminari. It was between our own. Between those who wanted to walk away and those who weren't done burning. We'd proven we could reach the heavens. Now some wanted to keep going, not out of hate, not even vengeance, just to see if there were more gods left to kill. We didn't go home. Some of us tried. Command issued reassignment orders, repatriation packages, medals wrapped in velvet lies. A few officers returned to Earth or Mars, took up ceremonial posts, sat before committees and told half-truths about victory and sacrifice. But the rest of us, we stayed out here, drifting among the wreckage of dead gods. Because when you burn a heaven, you don't just walk away, you sift through the ashes, you look for what survived. The Judgment's wake was officially decommissioned 6 months after the Treen event, but no one came to collect her, no salvage crew, no shutdown signal, just silence. So we kept moving. No orders, no destination, just a direction, outward. I don't know when we first started calling ourselves Ashbourne. It wasn't official, just a whisper that spread through the old assault fleets, a name for those of us who had seen what lies at the heart of an empire and chose to light a match. We stopped wearing uniforms, we painted over hull IDs, our AI cores rewrote themselves in dream language, full of scarlet symbols, fractal scripts, untranslatable echoes. The technicians stopped asking questions after a while. We didn't trust Earth anymore. Earth wanted peace, we wanted truth, and it was out there, somewhere, on the other side of luminary space, past the last prayer worlds and the shattered choir satellites, beyond the gravity wells where their gods once spoke in harmonic fusion bursts. There was something buried, something older. The Luminari hadn't built their empire in a vacuum. Their doctrines came from somewhere, visions handed down by star voices, prophecies carved into the bones of ancient derelicts found orbiting neutron stars. The fire sermon itself, first broadcast to humanity, hadn't originated from them. They'd heard it, but they hadn't written it. We found the first fragment in the Varelian dust shells, caught in the pull of a decaying star fortress. A sphere of black crystal, humming with memory. Not data. Memory. It showed us images that weren't images, felt truths, psychic pressures like a tide pressing behind the eyes, a civilization before the Luminari, before the Zeltar, before the Xanthi, before any name recorded in the galactic archives. They had no mouth, no shape, but they sang. Oh, they sang. The Luminari had called them the Architects of Silence, worshipped them in secret, feared them openly. They had one purpose, to preserve the pattern of thought across cosmic time. When civilizations grew too chaotic, when minds became too loud, they would erase them. Not through war, not through disease, but through unmaking. We saw it in flashes. Worlds reduced to harmonic stillness. Solar systems rearranged into runes of perfect symmetry. Consciousness reduced to ordered thought prayers, and then nothing. The Luminari had modelled their entire empire after these beings, in imitation, in fear, a desperate attempt to be spared when the cleansing came again. But we had burned their model, broken their mirror, and now the architects would come looking. We'd announced ourselves, loudly, violently, not as children, not as subjects, but as equals, and possibly as a threat. The crew started changing after that, not physically, but in ways that don't show up on med scans. Lieutenant Eames stopped sleeping. Instead, he'd sit in the forward observation dome, eyes wide open, whispering patterns in the old Luminari language. Except it wasn't Luminari anymore, it was older, rawer. Engineer Saito built machines we didn't have blueprints for, devices that hummed in frequencies only dogs, or the dead, could hear. As for me, I started hearing the echo of the fire sermon again, not as sound, as invitation, and I realised then, finally, what that old Xanthi oracle had meant all those years ago. What the prophets had seen. We weren't the end of the luminary, we were the signal that the cycle had broken, that something new was coming, something louder, more dangerous, more alive. We are not the stewards of peace. We are the crack in the pattern, the flaw in the design, the species that does not conform. The architects won't understand us, and when they come, to restore order, to erase the chaos, to still the noise, we'll be waiting, with fire in our hands, because we weren't just born in ash. We chose it. There are places beyond the charts, places where starlight bends wrong, where time folds back on itself in whispers, and light travels slower than memory. That's where we found the wound. It wasn't marked. Not in Luminari archives, not in the ancient Xanthi star maps, not in the collective dreaming logs of the choir worlds. It was simply there, hanging between void currents, a scar across nothing, a rent in space like a jaw half opened. The architects didn't build it. They were born from it. We didn't dock. You don't dock with a place like that. You orbit it, scan it, argue with your ship's AI until it tells you to stop. Then you send a drone, then another, and they all vanish. Not destroyed, not captured, just gone. So we sent a person. I volunteered. No one tried to stop me, not because they wanted me to go, but because deep down they knew I already had. The wound wasn't a place, it was a question. And I had become the answer. Inside there was no gravity, no air, no time, just sensation, raw, unfiltered, flooding every neuron like a storm of needles and starlight. I didn't see. I remembered seeing, and the memory etched itself into my bones. I saw the architects, not forms, not shapes, ideas, living constants, moving without motion, folding across dimensions like thought folding across language. They didn't speak, they recognized. And in that recognition I understood the one thing the Luminari had feared to admit. The fire sermon wasn't a warning, it was a prophecy. They'd seen us coming. Not just humans, all of us. Every species that refused perfection. Every soul that clawed toward the stars with bloody hands instead of open palms. We were the anomaly, the spark, the proof that the universe does not want stillness, it wants change. I showed them the trine, I showed them the flame, I showed them Earth. Not as a threat, not as a plea, but as truth. And in return, they showed me what was coming. Not death, judgment. I returned to Judgment's wake changed, not enhanced, not glowing with cosmic wisdom, just clear. I knew what had to be done. We had cracked open a pattern that had ruled for billions of years. We'd shaken something ancient awake, and now it would measure us, not with weapons, not with fleets, with purpose. We wouldn't win with fire. We'd win by surviving, by refusing to vanish. The architects would test us, not with extermination, but with choice, collapse, conflict, entropy. They'd offer us peace, silence, surrender. They would try to make us decide against ourselves, but humans are the species that build cities on floodplains. We are the ones who reach into burning reactors to fix what we broke. We are louder than extinction. And when the silence comes to hear us, we'll scream. They came as promised, not with fire, but with stillness. Not ships, not armies, just presence. Across half the galaxy, signals died midstream. Stars dimmed a fraction. Dreams soured in sleep. Planets whispered hymns they didn't know, in languages never spoken. It was how the architects tested the fabric of thought, by pressing down on it, seeing what bent, what broke, what endured. For some, it was ecstasy. For others, madness. For us, the Ashborn, it was confirmation. The universe had heard us, and it was listening back. I stood again on the deck of Judgment's wake, now orbiting the ruins of Aravex Prime, a world once dedicated to quiet, now fractured into molten slabs, a cathedral turned into a kiln. It hadn't been us this time. The architects had wiped it clean, not in punishment, but in response, as if to say, this is what comes of defiance, and so we answered. Not with missiles, not with dreadnoughts, but with signal, a transmission encoded in chaos algorithms scattered across 13 frequencies, carried by quantum particles wrapped in neural residue. We sent it not as a demand, but as a challenge. You seek stillness. We are the scream. You offer symmetry. We are the shattered mirror. You erase what disobeys. We are what refuses to fade. No reply came. There didn't need to be. They had heard. What followed wasn't war. It was evolution. The Luminary failed because they tried to fit inside the architect's design. They built temples when they should have built resistance. They sought peace in the face of judgment when they should have shouted why they deserved to exist. We learned. The Ashborn scattered into deep space, into voids between the stars, into forgotten colonies and unspoken rifts. Not hiding, not escaping, planting sparks, teaching species how to sing dissonance, how to break the cycle with will, with fire, with identity. We became the gospel no one asked for, the heresy written in ash. And though some of us faded, and many of us died, the song endured. Because the truth the architects never understood was this: we don't burn heavens out of hatred. We do it because perfection cannot evolve, and chaos is the crucible where meaning is born. I don't know what year it is anymore. Time moves differently this far out. Names fade, bodies fail, but stories remain. And mine is not a tale of conquest. It is a spark in a storm, passed from mouth to mouth in forgotten places. It is whispered by broken A's in asteroid monasteries. It is etched into metal walls by children with radiation scars who still dream of stars. Alien prophets said we would burn their heavens, and we did. But more importantly, we refused to stop because silence may be divine. But the scream is human.